Hey everyone, this is International Master David Pruess for Chess.com, and today I'm going to teach you the most popular defense for black to 1e4, and that is the Sicilian. After this video, you will be ready to play it. So the Sicilian defense goes c5, like this, and that's it. You're ready. Go play the Sicilian. Just kidding. Okay, what's the point of this move here? Which doesn't really develop the black pieces that much, although it lets the queen move. The main point of this opening is simply to control d4 so that white can't put two pawns next to each other in the center. So that's basically white's strategic threat in this position, is to play d4 and establish a duo of pawns controlling four squares in the center if white can get that duo. So black is going to prevent that with c5. Now, the main way white usually responds to the Sicilian is to play knight f3 and then on the next move d4. And that's called the Open Sicilian. And after black takes, white puts the knight in the center. So white trades off his central pawn for black's not as central pawn. But what white's trying to do is develop quickly and post their pieces aggressively in the center, taking advantage of the fact that c5 didn't really develop black as quickly as it developed white. Now, if you want to learn more about the Open Sicilian, we have separate videos for each of these different variations that black can play in the Open Sicilian, like how to play the Najdorf, how to play the Scheveningen, how to play the Sveshnikov, etc. So you can look those up. But what I'm going to talk about right now are the other things that white can do other than the Open Sicilian and sort of the point of the Sicilian. So there are two principal other things that white can do. One is to play some kind of a system with c3, trying to play d4 and be able to put two pawns in the center anyway, right, by recapturing with the pawn. Now, in general, if white plays c3, planning to play d4, there's no reason you should allow white to get that perfect center. So in chess, to play well, you want to get used to seeing what the upsides and downsides of different moves are. The upside of c3 is to be able to play d4. The downside is taking away the best development square from this knight. So what black should do is they should fight white for these two squares while white is busy taking over this square here. Okay, you're not going to be able to stop d4 powered by the white queen, so go after these two squares. And there are two variations black can play here that give black an acceptable game. One is knight f6 attacking this pawn. After it advances, you come here, and white plays d4, but his central pawns are already, they're not standing next to each other, so they're not as flexible. And black, can trade this pawn easily with d6 if he wants to. The second thing that black can do about c3 is he can play d5, and white's just going to have to trade pawns right away. Black will play queen takes d5, which often you wouldn't want your queen here, but the main reason you wouldn't want your queen there is because of knight c3, which is now impossible. So white will play d4, and black will just develop, and the game will continue with this pawn tension here for a little while. And you may eventually get a pawn trade on one square or the other. You'll almost certainly get a pawn trade on one of those two squares, but black should be able to develop successfully. So the second thing that white can do in general is to basically play with a pawn on d3 and keep the position closed. And they're not usually going to start with d3, but they're going to play, something like knight c3, and then depending on how black develops, white's usually going to put their bishop on g2, and a pawn on d3. And these variations here are called the closed variation of the Sicilian, or the King's Indian attack sometimes. And they're generally going to be characterized by white having space over here on the king side and black having space over here on the queen side. Okay? It's also possible, if you want, as black, that you can try to respond by setting up pawn tension in the center with d5. And then you can get positions that look like this, where the two sides have pawn tension like this, but each side is sort of supporting their own pawn. So that's another big thing you can get out of the Sicilian in the closed variations, is you can get this kind of tension between these two pawns. And I'll just mention one other thing that white can do in the Sicilian, which is they can start with knight f3, and now if black plays knight c6, or d6, white can play bishop to b5 check. And if the knight were on c6, it wouldn't be check, but it would still be bishop b5. And you can often trade this bishop and get Spanish or Ruy Lopez type games where white's castling and then they might play d3 and keep it close, or they might play c3, d4. They've got a lot of options. The one thing to note is that white cannot really play a good bishop b5 against e6 because there's no piece to trade on, and black just gains time for their natural queenside expansion against white's bishop. All right, so that's the Sicilian defense. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you around on Chess.com.